I travel a lot to different countries. I'm actually quite amused by how similar people really are. And yet they think that foreigners are so strange and different. Yes, like the way of thinking is different, and sometimes people have ideas in different sequences. But I think that fundamentally, for example, like I think the Chinese and Americans are very similar people. Whenever a lawyer lets go of details is, I think, when they really start to become less and less valuable. So I think that's the most important thing I learned is details matter. And often entire cases turn on one little detail.
Senhoras e senhores, sejam bem-vindos a mais um episódio do Direito de Resposta, episódio 138. E esse episódio muito especial, nosso primeiro episódio internacional. Então já vou contextualizar aqui vocês que tão logo a gente acabe essa apresentação, eu vou conversar com o nosso convidado Michael Kim, fundador do Kobre Kim em inglês. Mas para você que quer acompanhar esse episódio nas plataformas Spotify, YouTube, e no vídeo nós teremos as legendas em português. Então aproveite muito esse episódio. É um marco pra gente, muito obrigado por estarem com a gente até aqui e futuramente novos episódios internacionais. Aproveitar para agradecer os nossos patrocinadores: Lopti, eficiência para advogados e redução de custos; Barbearia Corleone, há 11 anos atendendo homens de maneira clássica; e Camargo Alfaiataria, legado, tradição e inovação na moda masculina. Agora, vou me dirigir ao nosso convidado em inglês. Michael, thank you very much to accept our invitation. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, likewise.
In our emblematic first international episode. And I'm very curious about your career, so thank you very much.
Likewise, I'm very happy to be here.
Michael, in our podcast, we have a very traditional question to start the podcast. It's about planning career. And you have a very solid and hybrid career because you started as a lawyer in Davis Polk, a very traditional law firm in the US. After you turned a federal prosecutor, and after entrepreneur because you founded, alongside Steve Kobre, the Kobre Kim, a global law firm. Have you ever planned this career?
No, I think until I left the U.S. Attorney's Office, up until then, like most people in law, I just thought of my career as doing the next thing that the system tells me I'm supposed to do. So I think most lawyers around the world, and I've met legal practitioners from many countries, even though they all speak different languages and they all look different, they're actually all very similar types of people, which is they're usually a little more conservative than the norm. They are usually a lot less fun than the norm in their country because they like to study, they like to read books, they like to think about things, and they like to follow rules, and they like to follow systems. So like most lawyers and people in that field, I ended up going from school to institution, kind of like the path all the seniors told me I'm supposed to walk until then. And then I think what happened after that, when I started the firm, was unusual in terms of my career. Not unusual maybe in the context of my life, but in terms of career, all the mentors I had at the time told me not to do it and told me I was wasting everything.
That's really nice to know because we are in the episode 138 and the majority of them for sure didn't plan a career, just follow the paths. And you bring something that I really like, that is the mentor person that helps a lot because he's a senior lawyer or more senior, then leave it, the career, and shows the ways that you can follow. So it's really nice you talk about the mentors. And you really have a different career because, as I told you, started in a law firm. You made Harvard. We'll talk about it. One of the most prestigious universities in the whole world. You started in a law firm. You turned a federal prosecutor. And after, an entrepreneur. So 3 different ways in the same career. So that's really interesting, and we will talk about during this episode. But firstly, I want to go back to your childhood because you are South Korean, but you moved to Costa Rica, a Central America country, completely different with your family. After, you go to Dubai, Middle East country, again, different country, different culture, and not the Dubai that you know today, completely different. And after you move to US when your career started. How was it? Because so many different countries, so many different cultures, how you deal with that, and what did you learn in your childhood that helped you in the rest of your journey, in your life journey and your professional journey?
So I don't think I learned much. I hated it most of the time. Because I think when you're young, you want acceptance and direction and certainty. And what happened was my father worked for a Korean company that took him to different countries in terms of, there was like a engineering company that had projects in different countries. So I left Korea when I was very young, but I lived in what's called an expat bubble of Koreans. So Koreans who don't live in Korea, but all kind of spend time with each other because they all work at the same company and so forth. And in that context, I ended up living in Costa Rica and then Dubai. And I hated it, the constant moving around. I didn't go to school many of the years, made friends and then had to leave. And then every country, I didn't speak the language initially. So I'd say mostly I hated it. But what's interesting is that as a result, what ended up happening is, although culturally I'm very Korean and it's my first language, I ended up kind of becoming untethered from what normally happens when you live in one society, where people are taught, oh, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing, or these are the important people in your society, or foreigners are strange and suspicious. Like, there's a bunch of things that even subconsciously people end up accepting when they live in one system. Same with lawyers, when they grow up in one system, there's a sort of a way that the universe is ordered for them. Oh, this is success means you go to this firm, you make partner, or you have this person as a client, etc. I think I ended up just being disconnected from that. So even today, I don't really feel like I belong in any country. Although I probably feel the most affinity with Middle East to Latin America and Korea and the US. But I think that disconnection actually helped me later when I was starting the business to not just try to copy other people, but just to try different things.
That's really nice. And I'd like to understand about this bubble, because you live your own culture, probably the South Korean culture. But even in this bubble, you live in different societies. So probably you learn a lot of things about this culture, these countries that helps you, as you told, when you founded your law firm. But even living in a bubble, do you think that these so different countries and so different cultures have something in common?
I think that actually even back then and then now, where I travel a lot to different countries, I'm actually quite amused by how similar people really are. And yet they think that foreigners are so strange and different. And I think it's only when you actually cross over a few different languages, you realize that yes, like the way of thinking is different, and sometimes people have ideas in different sequences. But I think that fundamentally, for example, like I think the Chinese and Americans are very similar people. And there's I think Brazil I find very interesting because everything is so big here. All the scandals are big, the companies are big. And then all the other Latin American countries I visit have like a myth about Brazil, about how big it is and how many kind of amazing and scary things happen there from their perspective of smaller countries. But in many ways, it's I feel like the image people have of other countries is very much like an ideal that they organize to try and understand everything. So at this point, I think I've tried to go beyond feeling like I'm in any one system. Yeah.
But it's really nice you told that, because if you think in Brazil, it's a continental country, as China, you told, as US. So even in Brazil, you have different cultures.
Yeah.
Even in China or in US, you have different cultures. So when you live in a bubble, maybe you lost something, but also you will have a solid culture from your own culture, like South Korea. So really nice to explain us. Michael, maybe because of that, I want to know, in 1988, firstly, you enter in Harvard School, and also you start to serve the U.S. Army. And that sparks big curiosity in me and probably in our listeners, because you are South Korean, you lived in different countries, and you decided to serve the U.S. Army. Why? Tell us.
So to be completely honest, it was a foolish decision. So what happened was I was in high school and they had a big truck come by. It was like a recruitment truck. And when I walked inside, it was the first flat screen TV I'd ever seen. Because back then, these were really rare. So a television that was like as flat as a piece of paper. Back then it was thicker, but it looked strange. And had this giant movie about an airborne infantry unit jumping from airplanes. And I thought, I was so excited, I just signed up right then and there. So it's just kind of youthful foolishness. But, I actually think that ultimately, just through sheer luck, it turned out that there was no war while I was in the U.S. military. So luckily, I ended up just having fun, essentially. My friends who stayed in were not so lucky. They ended up in many wars and terrible things. But I think there's a lot of decisions like that I've made, which when I'm just based on pure instinct and emotion, that it's kind of like what you make of it. I ended up getting a lot out of it. But there was no patriotism. There wasn't any kind of big thought or plan. It just, at the moment, I was quite impressed by the flat screen TV and signed up.
And that's really funny because I can remember right now the Hollywood movies when the U.S. Army tried to recruit people in front maybe university, and I can remember that. And that's funny. But the thing is, you said, well, I just decided, but in fact, to stay in the U.S. Army for 14 years, more than a decade. What did you learn there that you use in the rest of your journey?
So I'd say the big takeaways I got was, number one, I got the chance to interact with a lot of different types of people. The U.S. military, because it's a voluntary force, mostly made up of kids from poor families. Because in many circumstances, people end up joining the military because it's the only way to get a job or only way to get out of where they live. So just to give you an example, in some of the troops that show up, some of the people that show up, you have to teach them how to read. There's a whole school to try to get them to become literate. Now, this is not universal, but just to give you an idea of some of the types of candidates that were coming, there were even some people who had never done basic hygiene before. When I was in the parachute school to learn how to parachute, the guy who was sitting next to me had never been in an airplane before. First time he was in an airplane, he would jump out of it. Wow. And after we got done with the school and we jumped a bunch of times, he asked me at the end what it's like to land. Is it really scary to land in an airplane? The guy still probably, I don't know, at some point he probably flew, but had never landed in an airplane before. So I'd say the opportunity to interact with people from different groups of life. And I think many people, for example, who become lawyers, of course, everyone is different, but many who become lawyers usually have a little bit of a privileged background. Not everybody. Some people overcome other situations, but many actually do. And I think having contact with other groups of people really did help me quite a bit, especially when it comes to relating to juries, when I started doing advocacy to non-judges in jury trials, which is very common in the U.S. The other thing I think I learned is there's a certain point in life up to where you can make lifelong friendships. And then after that, you're kind of like too old to make new friends at the same level. So I think the Army and then the university was probably the last bit of that. So I still have very good friends from the Army today.
That's nice to hear. And I didn't know that about this reality of the U.S. Army. I don't know other armies in the world, but it's really nice to know. But Michael, one curiosity, because you are South Korean and you serve U.S. Army, how was it for the people that served with you?
In terms of citizenship, I ended up becoming a U.S. citizen partway through my time in the Army. So what a lot of people don't realize is the U.S. Army actually, you can be in it without being a U.S. citizen, but you can't be an officer, but you can be enlisted. So I was enlisted when I was a Korean citizen. And then after I became a U.S. citizen, I became an officer. I think that the Army has always been a little bit ahead of society in terms of attitudes and integration. And so even though a lot of the people I was serving with had actually never met a person from Asia before, and probably some of them came from quite biased backgrounds in terms of how their families' attitudes were, it was really fairly harmonious because you're in an environment where you're really judged by how good you are today in terms of adding to the mission of the unit, as opposed to, I think, sometimes in regular civilian society, people can live in their own little bubbles, but there you're just together all the time. And, it's either somebody can carry a pack or they can't. There's no you're not judging people by how they look. So it was quite harmonious. So.
And do you think that serve the U.S. Army helps you to feel more American?
I think lately I felt less and less American ever since I think the U.S. itself changed quite a bit, and I've spent more time outside the U.S. But I think the concept of America is because it's a country that, kind of like Brazil, is not founded on one ethnic group. It's from a lot of different people who moved there, and it creates a new entity, essentially, called Brazil or the U.S. There's always a debate about who's more American. And once in a while, if I encounter somebody who's biased and because of their concept of what it means to be American, they kind of try to argue to me that they're more American. It's always a good concept to roll out that, I served in the military and they didn't. So that sometimes helps in some discussions.
Okay, really nice. Let me ask you something. Because you served U.S. Army for 14 years and you enter in U.S. Army, the same time you enter in Harvard School. After, he goes to Harvard Law School, and after we start to work. How you deal with both your professional career and the U.S. Army?
So basically, I had a period of active duty, and then the rest of it I was in reserve. So ended up all the way to when I was a prosecutor, I basically did reserve duty after the active duty. So it was I was very lucky. Everything's timing. This was during a time when the U.S. had no wars. And they were actively trying to push people out of active duty into reserve. So I only had to do a little bit of active duty, and then I was part of a whole group. They had gathered to fight the Soviets in Europe, and that never happened. So then we all got to be civilians.
Okay, really nice, really nice. Well, we've talked about Hollywood movies when we talked about the U.S. Army and we were recruited. Again, I will mention Hollywood movies because I'd like to talk about your other experience about Harvard Law School. And Harvard sparks curiosity, especially, I guess, because of these movies. How is the selection process? If you can talk about the contest, I'm very curious about. And also, how was your experience over there? What do you learn in Harvard Law School? So, and I'm sorry, not just talking about technical things, but also especially about human skills and connections that you make there.
I'll tell you first about what I think is the most valuable thing I learned at Harvard Law School, and then I'll tell you a strange story about how I got in. So I think actually, frankly, the most valuable thing I learned at Harvard Law School was to withstand huge amounts of pain doing boring, detailed work. And I think that this is often overlooked aspect of the profession of law, is that fundamentally you're doing incredibly boring, detailed work at some level that the clients either don't want to do themselves or they can't do. Sometimes young lawyers or young law students come to me and they are very excited about going into law, and they have watched some movie about some lawyer who was in some dramatic trial. And I tell them, that's sort of what you get if you get yourself into the right position and you're doing the most exciting aspects of law. But I want you to go around your house and look at every warranty, and those are like the little documents you get when you buy a appliance, and you get like a little piece of, like a little booklet about how to operate it. And it also has all the legal qualifications about if it breaks and if in various ways it breaks, who's responsible, whether they're going to pay for a replacement and all that. It's very, very long in tiny print. I want you to find every single one and read every line and look for any punctuation or grammatical mistakes and write them down, and do this every single day for 10 years. If you think you could do this, then you can actually be a good lawyer. If you think this is beneath you, then this is not the profession for you. And I think actually a lot of my work and law school, including I was on a journal called the Harvard Law Review, was doing exactly that for gargantuan numbers of hours. And actually, I think that the biggest issue I see with lawyers is that they go through a period like that at the beginning of their career. And sometimes that period can last 5-10 years of doing very detailed work. And many of them give up during that time because they say, oh, this is not what I went to law school for. Okay? Not understanding that's integral to the actual job. And then the other phase is then they practice for 15, 20 years. And then they decide, oh, I'm too important for details. And they keep trying to skate by based on big concepts. And I think whenever a lawyer lets go of details is, I think, when they really start to become less and less valuable. So I think that's the most important thing I learned is details matter. And often entire cases turn on one little detail, right? The way I got in was I had, luckily, very good grades in college, but it was mostly grades and a test score on something called the law school admissions test at the time, LSAT. I had decent grades, and then I took the LSAT. And when I took the LSAT, for some reason, even though I'd prepared for it, these are all like logic games and like really quick reading things. I had 11 questions left that I had not done. And I had only about 10 seconds left, and I'd run out of time. And this almost never happens to me because I'm a fairly decent test taker. But for some reason, on this day, I totally messed up. And I looked at those 11 bubbles. It was like a little sheet that you had to fill in A through E. And I didn't have time to read the question. So I filled all 11 in randomly. And I got 10 out of the 11 right. The probabilities of that happening are like astronomical. But only for that reason, I actually got to the score that one needed to actually get admitted that year.
So you just cross
random? Just filled in random bubbles.
10 in 11?
Yes. I filled in 11 random bubbles, and I got 10 of them right.
Impressive.
So maybe the universe wanted me to be a lawyer. I don't know.
Really nice, really nice. And it's really nice to know that because, as I told you, Harvard sparks curiosity. The experience of it there, how to enter that, because it's different from here. Here, you just apply a test. The majority of the university. Right now, we have new universities like one from medicine, Albert Einstein, that is very famous, that you have not just a test, but you have also interviews to understand your human skills. So it's probably something more similar than Harvard. So it's really nice to understand that because we are starting here that right now, and US and Harvard starts bunch of years ago, so really nice to understand. How was the period in university? Because you can choose two ways. You can study, focus, or you can party. How was it?
Well, so Harvard at the time, and I think still now, is a collection of kids who were not super socially successful in high school. So the partying was very limited. I mean, the kids, I think, thought they were partying, but compared to U.S. party schools, this was very, very pathetic. So most kids actually studied a lot in university. And I was, so I'm the first person in my family to actually go to a university. My father went to like a night school program, like to get a certificate, but I'm the first one who ever went to a university. And then I felt so lucky to be in the U.S., going to a university that the whole time I just thought this was like such a great opportunity to learn everything and use all the resources. So I really didn't take it for granted. I really tried to make the most of it. And Harvard does have just massive resources for anything you want to study, any kind of activity you want to explore. So I'm very grateful to the university for all those years.
It works because you are here right now. So congrats. And really nice to understand that. After, when you graduated in Harvard, you joined Davis Polk, one of the leading law firms in US. How was it? How you started in Davis Polk, and what did you learn there?
So I think in many ways, when I created Kobre Kim, I copied various aspects of Davis Polk I really admired. So even though it was very common back then, and maybe still now, to have a very harsh environment within a law firm where people would yell at each other and they'd be really, really mean to each other and so forth. Davis Polk always had, by its culture, a very genteel culture where people would criticize, but in more of a diplomatic way. And I thought that that culture was more conducive to people being productive. So I'm not like, one of these people who just likes to make everything nice because it just sounds nice to say everybody should be nice to each other. In fact, it's actually counterproductive if you're not honest with each other. And if something's wrong, people need to tell each other, especially when you're servicing a client. You have to do it correctly. But Davis Polk had a really nice way of communication about it. And that's something I've tried to replicate here. I think that another aspect I learned a lot was just attention to detail and really trying to make everything perfect. Now, this is something that I think in concept, everybody says that they would like to do. But in reality, to actually reach that level of quality requires an amount of personal sacrifice many people are unwilling to actually do. And many people are not able to admit to themselves, I actually only want to do a B+ job and I'm a B+ person, which is fine, but they actually don't admit that to themselves. So they don't actually know that they're not doing their best. I think at Davis Polk, whenever you were not doing an A+ job, people would point it out. And I thought that was a very, very useful culture.
But let me ask you something. Do you think everything that you told right now about the details, about to be honest, it's a Davis Polk culture or a culture that it came from American law firms?
I think that from what I've seen from other U.S. law firms, there is I think among a lot of the different countries I visited, the U.S. law firms are more business-like than many other countries' law firms.
Sure.
But of course, compared to other types of industries where there's professional ownership or institutional ownership, it's still less business-like. But among law firms, there is a much more of a culture of directness and judging people by their productivity than in other countries. It's got pluses and minuses. Yeah.
And I guess it's the best way, because if you think in Brazil, for example, and I'm just talking about law firms, but also about Brazilian companies, I don't think they are so honest. They prefer to create a speech to don't get the people said. So the feedback is different. It's not directly, you need to get better in this because I like you, but you need to get better. Oh, it starts with a speech. You are so nice. You are doing a good job, and don't tell the truth. And that's a terrible thing. So I guess in the beginning, it's very difficult to listen to something that you don't want to listen. But it's so much better because you can get better. So I really like this American culture, or the majority of law firms, American law firms, do with professionals over there. Michael, there is something that takes my attention because you were in Davis Polk, and I can see that it was a place that you really like to work. But you make like a big turning point in your career because you turned a federal prosecutor. So you were in the private sector, you go to a public sector, a totally different career. So why did you decide to switch sides? How was it, especially the contest? Because I'm really curious about how you turned a federal prosecutor. And what's the difference, in your opinion, between the private and the public sectors?
So I think, to be fair, the transition from Davis Polk to being at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan was still very much a conventional move. It was not a big, risky move. It was not anything innovative. And the reason for that is that in the litigation circles of the U.S. and particularly New York, people who have been at the U.S. Attorney's Office, especially Southern District of New York, end up in a lot of important positions throughout the whole industry. And for that reason, if you're going to be in litigation, going from a law firm to the U.S. Attorney's Office is considered a kind of a career-enhancing move. So it was not like I had some creative idea and I'm going to go do something wild. It was like the thing that a lot of people wanted to do. And I got lucky enough to be sponsored essentially by a person named Bob Fisk, who used to be an independent prosecutor. He investigated the Clintons under something called the Whitewater investigation. And he was at Davis Polk. He came back. And then every year he'd call up who was then Mary Jo White, the U.S. attorney, and say, oh, take these kids. And I ended up being put into that batch. And so that is usually a path where after you're there for a few years, you end up going into something higher in government, or you go to back to a law firm, either as a partner or going with a few years to partner. So that was the path I thought I was on when I went there. It's just only when I got there I started getting all kinds of crazy new ideas. Yeah.
But let me ask you something, Michael. How is the contest? Because I understand that it's something not so different in this litigation area. But because I understand how you decided to be a federal prosecutor, but how did you turn? How is the contest?
It's extremely difficult to get in, and pretty much New York especially is filled with people from good law schools who had good grades, who either clerked for a good federal judge, which I didn't, or worked at a really good law firm. So it's kind of like that becomes like the basic requirement, but there's so many people like that in New York. So pretty much you need a connection. A lot of people outside the U.S. think the U.S. functions like a machine and personal connections don't really matter. But at least from my experience, the U.S. is a lot more like that than most people realize. So the only reason I got in was like Bob Fisk basically called up Mary Jo and said, here are the 3 or 4 people you should hire this year. And then that's how I got hired.
But you don't have to make a test or...
Oh, you have to apply and go to interviews and not mess up their
just interviews.
Yeah.
Really interesting. You stay there for a bunch of years. And I know that you put a bunch of people behind the jails.
Yeah.
Can you tell us some stories of this period, especially one that I know about the X-ray?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll start with that story. And I think the interesting things I discovered there is first that what became the beginnings of my thought about starting something new in the legal profession, which became Kobre Kim, was before I went there, I had been through all these institutions, Davis Polk, Harvard Law School, that had a certain view of what it meant to be a good lawyer. And I thought all the good lawyers were in these big firms and they had certain backgrounds, went to the U.S. Attorney's Office or clerked for the right judge. And when I saw people in court, I realized there's actually a number of people with non-traditional backgrounds, of all backgrounds, who were incredibly effective oral advocates. And they were really, really doing a great job for their clients and really persuading the judge and the jury in a way that I thought was amazingly effective, and it shattered my notion of the best lawyers are at places like Davis Polk. It was a much more complex picture than that. It was almost like you grow up in your parents' home and they tell you certain values of, oh, this is how the world works. And then you kind of like go out to the world for the first time and you realize the world is a lot more complicated than what your parents taught you. And that's kind of how I felt. So I think that's what germinated ideas about Davis Polk, about Kobre Kim. In terms of cases I spent most of my time in the Securities and Commodities Fraud Task Force. But before that, I spent a couple of years doing general crimes and narcotics trafficking cases and other violent crimes. And say the best part was meeting all of the people who had committed crimes. I mean, they're mostly pretty interesting people, especially fraudsters. Really amazing, interesting frauds. But I'll start with the X-ray, and then I'll tell you sort of a few other cases real quick. So the X-ray situation, probably among the U.S. Attorney's Office alumni, most people remember me by that case, which is there was a person that committed an armed bank robbery. And this was a really easy case to win because not only had he left his thumbprint on the teller window as he was demanding money, he put his hand on it and left his entire fingerprints on the window, but he was identified by the teller from a lineup of like a few hundred photographs. She had picked out the exact photograph of him. And when he was arrested with the disguise and the gun that was used in the robbery. So obviously, this was like, it shouldn't even be a trial, but he was facing a very lengthy sentence, even if he pled guilty, because of these laws that punish repeat offenders. So he went to trial anyway, even though he had no hope of winning. And during the trial, I think he felt so desperate, he hatched a plan to kill me in the middle of trial. The way he had tried to do it, there was a whole FBI investigation, is he took a knife, a blade, razor-sharp blade that was probably this long, and he put it in his rectum. His plan, he walked into the court, and his plan was, during my closing argument, to get up and slash my throat in front of the jury. Really would have been a really memorable way to exit the world, but that was his plan. And he had done it before with someone else in jail. He had pulled it out of his rectum and slashed somebody with it. So he was already quite practiced in it. And that day, the guard in the courtroom noticed that he had a different walk than previous days. Now, I guess if you spend your whole life in the courtroom, you'd notice things like that. So he said, there's a way this man walks, and today he's walking differently. And so he said there must be something in his rectum. Now, this is not the obvious conclusion, but again, it's an experienced courtroom guard. So they did an X-ray, and sure enough, there was a blade in there, and he ended up getting like an extra, I think, 25 years or something because of the plan to kill a federal prosecutor. But yeah, I still have the X-ray. My friend who was the FBI agent who was investigating gave me a copy of it, and I have it displayed in my office. But you know, when you go to the doctor, the radiologist, they have the light in the background. You can turn it on and off. So I have it. I got one of those, and it's just pitch black with a button on it that says dedication. And a few times, young associates have come to me for career advice, and they're kind of like stressed out about, I was made to work really hard, or this partner was mean to me, or whatever. And I asked them, are you really dedicated to success in this profession? Do you know what it will take? They say, I'm absolutely dedicated. And I basically say, you see that button that says dedication? I want you to push it, and it'll show you dedication. They push it. Of course, there's an X-ray with a man with a knife in his rectum. And I basically say, this man was prepared to do anything to achieve his objective. Said, if you're prepared to do this, then you're dedicated. Everything else is not dedication. So they don't let me talk to associates anymore, I guess. It's not exactly inspiring. But at the time, I was quite amused by it because I thought it's kind of a funny situation, and it'll make for an interesting story in my life, which I've retold many times. But as time passes, and as I get older, I actually do feel sorry for him in terms of the amount of desperation he must have felt to do something like that. And he had a very kind of difficult childhood and background. So I think the whole thing is really a sad episode, but it led to at least some amusing discussions with associates over the years.
At the same time that it's funny, it's very serious.
Yeah.
I never heard anything like that. So thanks for sharing with us. A Sapir Legal Connections é o hub de soluções para mercado jurídico com foco especial em escritórios de advocacia de pequeno e médio porte. Nosso objetivo é ajudar esses escritórios a se profissionalizarem, melhorar a gestão e crescer de forma estruturada e sustentável. Oferecemos serviços de consultoria, recrutamento, palestras e mentoria, sempre alinhados às necessidades do seu escritório. Se você quer levar o seu escritório para o próximo nível, acesse agora sapiro.com.br e conheça todas as nossas soluções. You told a emblematic case, and one that it's, as you told, very simple to win. So I'd like to ask you two things. Another story, but with a complex case, and I would like to know, as a federal prosecutor, and you bring right now a very serious story, don't you be afraid to work with that, to walk in New York as a federal prosecutor, and I don't know, find anyone that can threaten you? I don't know. Don't you be afraid about it?
Ironically, when I was dealing with the violent criminals, I had less fear of it, especially professional criminals. If I was dealing with criminal organizations, for the most part, they were quite professional. They knew killing prosecutors wouldn't achieve anything in terms of the outcome. In fact, I met one professional criminal I was prosecuting who had done his own calculation of how much jail time he thought he would get. So that's a very professional approach in terms of dealing with the prosecutor. It was really when I started doing more white-collar criminal cases. The difficulty there is I really liked dealing with the professional con men because they had done serial frauds. They were very professional in their dealings with prosecutors. The difficulty is the people who thought they were innocent, in fact, had committed a crime, but they thought they were being unjustly prosecuted. Some of them were quite volatile, and I did get death threats from some of them. So ironically, it was the white-collar criminals who believed that they were innocent that were the most dangerous to deal with.
That's true. Okay, thanks so much to share with us. In 2003, the real turning point in your career, because obviously when you turn a federal prosecutor, it was a turning point. But right now, I'm talking about to be an entrepreneur. That it's completely different. So you founded Kobre Kim alongside Steve Kobre, that was a federal prosecutor as well. So when you decided, both of you, to take that risk to found a law firm, how was it? If you could bring some behind-the-scenes stories about that period, it would be very nice.
Yeah, so I think the idea for it germinated when we did a very long trial together, and we spent almost a year working exclusively with each other, away from the U.S. Attorney's Office, inside the courthouse. We had our own little office there, preparing for this trial that went on. The preparation went on for like 8 months, and the trial itself was almost 3 months. And so during that time, I found that I worked very well with Steve Kobre, who was a contemporary of mine. And at the same time, I knew that my next step would be to try to go back to a firm like Davis Polk. And I felt like, while that would really have a lot of positive aspects to it, I felt like I only get to live my life once. And that seemed kind of too predictable. It seemed like I wasn't super excited about just doing that. And I think for people, especially a lot of people in law, it matters to them what other people think of them. So they're very much into like, oh, I went to this reception, I'm a partner at this firm, or I'm a judge, and people respect me. That's like a big thing for people in law. So for me, other people's approval or disapproval is not really that relevant. So I was really thinking more of like, what would make me happy? What would I enjoy doing? As opposed to what will cause me to be in some position where somebody will respect me. So I really wanted to try out a bunch of business ideas on the legal profession and have my own operation. So I convinced Steve Kobre, and that's how we tried it. And we had very primitive ideas in the beginning. I told you earlier in the interview that I went to all the people I considered mentors, which is a very common thing for lawyers to do, because they look for precedent whenever they write anything. And before they do anything, they talk to mentors or more experienced lawyers. And every single one of them told me this was a terrible mistake. I would be throwing away all my credentials. And I think it was coming from a good place in terms of they were concerned about me. But I think the problem with mentorships is that if you have a situation where everything is static, so everything that the last generation went through is the same thing you're going through, somebody who has experience in the same system can give you a lot of insights that are extremely valuable. But I think even by 2003, the legal profession has started changing at a much more rapid pace, whereas for decades it had stayed very similar. And I think today it's changing even more rapidly. So I think the value of mentors is diminished quite a bit, because a mentor is really somebody who went through experience in a system that now is actually very different from what it is now. But of course, it worked for them, so they have very fixed ideas about how you become successful or how you achieve your goals. So all my mentors told me not to do it. I didn't reject it in the sense of I thought I knew better. I just thought that they were going from their own experiences and that everything was changing much more rapidly. And the legal profession was becoming much more businesslike. So yeah, when we started, I think the problem is because the legal profession is so much into institutions, when two people come out, and the only thing we had going for us was we're at the U.S. Attorney's Office, so that gave us some credibility. But we were operating out of Steve Kobre's apartment as our first office, and our office number was actually just his home number. And so this looked ridiculous to most people, and we had a lot of trouble getting people to call us. I think eventually, when we finally convinced somebody to call us for a potential case, I think it was Steve Kobre who answered the phone. They thought it was a receptionist, and it was just, he said, "Oh, Michael Kim," and I was just sitting next to him. And on top of it, he had a newborn baby. His wife was at work, and we had to take care of this kid, and the baby was crying the entire time in the background. So this was an impossible situation to get work. And for a long time, I think probably for the first several years, people basically just treated us with disdain a lot of the time, with a lot of disrespect. And I think that's just the reality in law. Whenever you do anything that's not normalized, a lot of lawyers who are in conventional situations end up rejecting it and usually treating that person with a lot of disrespect. And that's basically what it was.
It was a big risk. So both of you were very courageous and really nice how to know everything started 20 years ago. I would like to know, Michael, how did you prepare for that? Because it's not simple to found a law firm, and you did it. But how did you both prepare to start that and to be an entrepreneur? Because we don't know how to do it. We don't learn in the university. You just learn in the life. How was it?
So I had never had any business experience before. Same with Steve Kobre. But, I think in the beginning it was very easy because just the two of us. And even though lawyers say, oh, that's a big risk, it really isn't. Compared to most people who start businesses, who have to invest huge amounts of money, sign guarantees, and then if that doesn't work out, they would become bankrupt. For lawyers, the most valuable asset is just already your law license, which you already have. And you don't really need anything beyond that. You just need a computer, and that's kind of it. Maybe some malpractice insurance. So I think that the most valuable thing, well, at the beginning, we didn't need that much business experience. I think through trial and error, we learned what to do and what not to do in business development. And to this day, a lot of the teachings in the firm about how to talk to clients, how to talk to co-counsel are from the horrific experiences we had the first several years of making every possible mistake and regretting it, losing money, et cetera. So we were really not prepared. But I think that because we were completely dependent on the income from that practice, we really kept thinking every time we did something to really have an honest discussion about what we did wrong and to really try and improve on it. So in terms of sales technique, dealing with co-counsel, going out and trying to generate business, et cetera. So at first several years, and it's still the case today, I always try to think about what I did wrong and try to improve it. So we were not, the bottom line is we were not prepared, but we kept preparing while we were doing it.
Okay, really nice.
But we called it fixing a plane while flying it.
Michael, it's very interesting. And you told that wasn't simple, but you don't need so much money to found the law firm, just the lessons. Do you think it's the same now? Because right now, I don't think it's just by the computers, because right now we have AI and all these things, the technology. Do you need, for someone that want to found their own law firm right now, need more money to invest?
I don't think they need more money, but I think the opportunities to practice law and make money is shrinking. I think a lot of activities that clients would consider they needed to pay a lot of money to somebody called a lawyer for, that area just keeps shrinking more and more to a degree that we've never imagined. Already, I think a lot of information processing, a lot of memorization, a lot of just knowing what the law is, simple application of law to facts is all mostly can be done by non-lawyers using machines. So I think this is the most challenging, from my perspective, it's ever been for lawyers. And what's most challenging also is the people who went through law school and legal training mostly were selected for certain traits. Usually they have good memories, they have good cognitive reasoning, good reading comprehension, all these things. That stuff is really what a lot of machines have started taking over. And a lot of other aspects like emotional intelligence, creativity in terms of client problems, being able to get into areas adjacent to law and really understand them, to think about the whole client solution. And I'd say a lot of emotional fortitude in terms of how you govern yourself and how you perceive situations and emotional control. These are things that were never tested for. So it's kind of a random dispersion among lawyers who has good traits and who doesn't, because the testing system tested for other things. And then they labeled as smart, capable. You're capable because you can remember things after you read them. Well, now everybody can with a few clicks. So I think it's extremely challenging now. It's not even a question of money. It's a question of the area of human activity that people are willing to pay other humans for keeps shrinking, in law in particular.
It's very interesting what you're bringing. It's about the machine and if the machine will switch or not the lawyers, because obviously, as you told, part of the job, the machine can do it. So as a co-CEO of a global law firm as a Kobre Kim, what's your opinion about the AI and all these tools? And this is a very important question, because not just because what is happening, because also it's a question of our sponsor, Lopti, that it's an AI company that has headquartered in Brazil and also in US. And I give you 10 access to have a trial. And I will tell to our listeners right now about the company.
A Lopt é uma plataforma de inteligência artificial criada sob medida para escritórios de advocacia e departamentos jurídicos. Ela reduz drasticamente o tempo de análise de documentos, entrega respostas com segurança e confiabilidade, sem alucinações comuns em IA genéricas, e combina o contexto dos documentos com uma base de legislação e jurisprudência curada pela própria Lopt. Entre suas principais funcionalidades estão defesas automatizadas, análise simultânea e comparativa de documentos e chat jurídico com base de legislação e jurisprudência confiável.
Michael, again, as a co-CEO, what's your opinion about AI? Do you think that this machine will switch the legal professionals? And how do you think that the AIs or the machines will change the legal market in the whole world?
So we've been less affected by it than many other law firms so far because of our practice area, which is unusual specialized litigation, specialized international litigation. And because there are not many routine aspects to what we do, it has not captured as much attention as many other law practices with much bigger payoffs for AI to learn how to do, such as deal documentation for fund formation, as to give an example. So we've been less affected by it so far, but yet more and more pieces of our activity can be done by AI, like information organization, reading a huge number of documents and organizing which human beings know who, what is a chronology of how they interacted, which documents were seen by who. This type of thing used to take people, teams of people, months and months. And now it can be done literally in minutes. So I think that our organization is also just going to need to evolve so that a lot of that activity, information organization, is going to be less and less done by humans in our organization. And we're going to have to keep pushing ourselves to have an internal lecture at the firm called Climbing the Value Pyramid, which means from the client's perspective, how they regard your place in their hierarchy of who's solving their problem. Are you at the lowest level where if you have a legal task, you do the legal task, and that's a component of the whole solution? Or are you somebody who can basically tell them how to deal with the whole situation and everything in between? And I think that personally, I think the legal profession is very arrogant. I think it's full of mostly arrogant people who want to preserve their positions rather than make things better. And I don't say that with any kind of negativity because I actually understand from their perspective, it's a lot more comfortable to ride out the next 10, 15 years of your career, 5, 10, 15 years of your career being comfortable rather than doing uncomfortable things to make things better. Partly it comes from the fact that law firms are owned by lawyers. And so at some point, it's not about maximizing the welfare of the entity. It's about maximizing the comfort level of the people who control it. And often these are kind of older people who maybe they only have a few years left to practice and they'd rather not be bothered making everything different. And because law firms are still not institutionally owned, if you do a bunch of things to make yourself uncomfortable but increase the value of the entity, it's going to benefit somebody 20 years in the future, not you, because you can't be a shareholder of a law firm after you leave it in most countries. And so I think this makes the adoption of technology much slower in law than in other industries. Nevertheless, I think for what we do, I mean, I always believe that any provider of any service are good. If you think you're getting over on the consumer, if you think you're being inefficient and you can charge the consumer for it, you might be able to get away with it, but eventually the market will punish you. And your own conscience should punish you. So I have been very much a proponent for always taking things that we don't really need to be doing and not doing it. Now, this doesn't mean I'm not on some crusade to save clients money because my duties are to my organization. My fiduciary duties are to maximize the profitability of my organization. So this is not about, we'll be more efficient and we'll charge clients less. It's more about focusing on activities for which the clients are willing to pay a lot of money because they can't get it elsewhere. And I think lawyers will really need to examine themselves to do this, but it'll be uncomfortable. And most law firms, because of the issues I mentioned, will talk a big game, but they won't actually do it at a deep level, I think, until the ownership of law firms changes.
100% agree with you. And I used to say that AI is good for us because the machine will take things that we don't need to do it, or organize documents. Our professional, the lawyer's professional or the legal professional, is strategic. It's very important. So it solves the client's problem. That's it. The rest, the machine can help us. So it's really nice to hear that. But just one thing. Here in Brazil, for example, we have, and talking about the market, we have almost 2 million lawyers. It's too much. More than 100,000 law firms. In US, the same, a bunch of lawyers and a bunch of law firms. Do you think there are space for new lawyers and new law firms in Brazil or in US, or is totally crowded?
I think the markets are very mature. If somebody wants to come and sell the same thing, I don't think there's much room here or in the US. And that's why when people come in, because for many lawyers, their training and selection they're usually people who are not trying to do new things. They want to copy what's been done, and they want to attain status. Mostly, the way most law firms try to compete with other law firms is to sell the same stuff, either cheaper, that's one strategy, or not cheaper, but through better friendships. So they're basically either saying, I'm closer to you, I'm a better friend, so therefore you should buy the same service from me, or I'll sell you the same service for cheaper. And those are two very, very difficult ways to compete. Now, this is all dressed up as many law firms say, oh, we're the best and we're more prestigious. So it's true that there's a generally a line based on the legal task you want to perform, like in litigation, where if you're below that level of quality, you could end up losing a case you should have won. But once you're above that level of quality, in my opinion, most law firms, the core service is very similar. The core people are very similar. And people saying, oh, we're a better law firm or we're smarter, for the most part, that's not going to make a difference to the outcome. It's probably not even true. A huge number of law firms are very similar in quality and outcome. So I think the key is going to be for new lawyers coming in, not just new competitors, the people who want to actually like compete in the industry, but new young lawyers coming up. And by young, I actually also include, let's say, junior to mid-level partners who you still have to work another 20 years, right? Plus. So you can't just be like, well, whatever's going to happen, it doesn't matter, next few years and then I'll be out of here. No, you have another 20 years of change ahead of you or more. I think that the key is going to be to not just copy other lawyers, but to really think about what are things that clients cannot get from other law firms or commonly get from machines. And am I really equipped to do that?
Again, 100% agree with you. I used to say that you have a Red Sea or a Blue Sea. You can stay here in the Red Sea where everyone make litigation and you have both sides, or a friendship or price, you choose. Here is the blue ocean. You have new areas, you have other things to work, other ways to work. So really nice to know about it. But Michael, you have a law firm that is highly specialized, focused in litigation and investigation. So you enter in that discussion because a bunch of law firms made this kind of job, litigation, and not all of them, but investigation. And you choose to turn down, for example, large clients as banks. So what is behind this strategy and how you can be different from other law firms, as you said right now?
So the whole strategy is to look for cases in a niche market, N-I-C-H-E. And it's a niche market because there are various problems in how the legal market functions that clients who have this need cannot easily find a law firm. So it's really three principles of niche market. First is conflict. If you have a small case, and it's against a big bank or whatever, you can find a small law firm to do it. But if you have a big case, especially a big international case, very hard to find a big law firm to help you. Why? Because of the unique nature of law firms, many of them want repeat business, and the market does not create usually big law firms that are able to be conflict-free. The second is a lot of geographic shapes. A lot of law firms end up following their clients and opening offices where their clients are. They are not designing their geography to figure out for multinational disputes, what are types of cases that do come up, but not so often that when a client has this dispute, they don't have one law firm to do it. So for example, we have, I think we're the only law firm in the world to have this following strange sounding combination, which is Delaware, New York, Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, Hong Kong, mainland China. Now you might think, what a crazy thing. Who needs that? The fact is that international investments involving China use this type of structure for various tax reasons. But for a bunch of reasons, there's no law firm that can litigate in all of them. And then the third is there are like areas of specialty that come up so infrequently that there's really no law firm or group incentivized to really develop a repeat business in them. And so we've gotten into that in terms of international judgment enforcement, representing international private clients who have billions of dollars and are being attacked by their political enemies, being in bankruptcies where we're representing creditors against major institutions, and intellectual property cases where we are going against very big tech companies on behalf of smaller companies. So these are all areas that the market doesn't create a ready-made product. And so that's where the whole thing is focused on. It's somebody told me it's like a rubber band where you twist it into a shape, but then the moment you let go, it wants to snap back to its original shape. So this requires a constant amount of maintenance to keep the firm focused on just focusing on the niche market and not having each lawyer just trying to develop their own book of business. Why? Ultimately, a lot of this work comes from other law firms, and we need to be trusted by them that we're going to come in and just do the case as well as we can, and we're not going to go in with some ulterior motive of criticizing them, displacing them, getting more business from the client, because all this distorts the clarity of what the lawyer's there to do, which is to do a good job on that case. But to be trusted by other law firms, we have to be what we say we are. And to be what we say we are, it takes a tremendous amount of internal work.
Thanks for sharing with us your strategy. It's totally clear and it makes sense. It's not easy because sometimes, as I told, you have to turn down some clients as you did because of the conflict. And because of this strategy, you have to have law firms in the whole world. You have right now a global law firm. But when you have a bunch of law firms around the world, it's so difficult to maintain the culture because you have your own culture. You start, as you told, in Steve's apartment. So you create over there your culture. How can you maintain this culture around the world, thinking that you are in different countries with different cultures?
Yeah, it's I think this is like maintaining a plane while flying it. You're never done. Once you like put this part into alignment, something else is out of alignment. This is why I fly around all over the world. I'd say the things we try to do is to maintain a uniform culture, and we're not always successful at it. I think number one, the key is to not have individual profit and loss by office. There's no concept of this office is profitable, this office is not. We always think of everything as like four wheels on a car. You know, which wheel is the most valuable? Well, actually all of them, because once one falls off, the whole car topples over. So we think of all the offices as valuable for the entire product. And not having individual office profit and loss has really helped in the mentality of, in each case, people honestly try to think about, well, who are the best people to work on the case? As opposed to, oh, this person is not on my team, or this is not going to count towards my profit, et cetera. So that's been extremely helpful. I think another aspect that's been helpful is that we all just have a narrow set of practice areas. So we all do the same thing. So even though we all speak different languages, and we all communicate in English within the firm, but we all come from different backgrounds, because we all do the same type of work generally, that's helped in terms of cohesion, as opposed to if you had a law firm with a lot of different areas. And over the years, I've had many opportunities to add practice areas. People want to come with their own clientele and their own practice. We've rejected all that because I want to keep it tight for everybody being able to deal with the same subject matter. And finally, I'd say the key has been organic growth. We've never merged with any other law firm. We have not taken any laterals with their own books of business so they become a silo within the firm. It's growing one by one and choosing and promoting people because of their ability and their personality, as opposed to absorbing entire law firms just to add to the revenue.
And that's really nice, Michael, because what I see in Brazil, it's bring someone some lateral because of the book of business. And I understand that strategy, but it doesn't fit with your strategy. And if I understand here, the team, it's so much more important than the player. And what I used to say is, if you have a team here in Brazil, I like to talk about soccer. No players, no any player, you can take the best player in the world, it's not bigger than the team. And if I understand it, is exactly what you are talking about. And you can maintain the culture with that. So it's really nice. And probably because of that, you achieve around 500 professionals in 17 offices around the world. If you come back in 2003, that was the goal. Have you ever imagined that Kobre Kim will achieve these numbers? And not just the numbers, but also the reputation that you have?
So I never imagined it, but I think if somebody had told me this is what would happen, I think I would have both a positive and a negative reaction. I think a positive reaction would be the philosophy of the three concepts I mentioned. This niche market, getting proof that the niche market exists would be very gratifying to me, that this unmet client need really did exist, that you could actually create a law firm. If you think about it, it's kind of strange and incredible that you have a law firm with no repeat clients, no individuals with books of business, and yet it can do 200 million, 240 million US plus revenue per year. That means there's at least that much, if not multiples of that, in unmet client demand, right? Clients that wanted to buy a product that they couldn't. So they were like cobbling together various substitute products. So that part would be very gratifying to me. The part I would have been unhappy with is the size. So I think that I told you earlier, I think many lawyers, they don't even realize this, but they're trapped in a artificial world where status means everything. Other people respecting them means so much. And this, in some ways, is very good in the sense that I like dealing with lawyers because in many ways, they're not just driven by money. They actually care about a bunch of other things that are kind of more noble, interesting. But this same obsession with what other people think of them ends up inhibiting their progress, either individually or as an industry. Obsession with status, prestige, belief in large institutions, belief in precedent. And many lawyers, when you ask them, oh, tell me about yourself, they try to brag about the size of their firm. We have a practice group that's like this many people. Now, in any other industry, it's profit that matters, not your cost of production. And it would be bizarre for somebody, let's say in the car industry to say, well, yes, that company and I have the same profits, but I'm achieving that profit with double the number of factories, right? Most people will be like, wait, you're getting the same profit, but you have twice the number of factories? Like, how incompetent are you that you need double the number of factories to achieve the same profit? I think that the optimization of law firms would be not focusing on the size, but rather how much value we add to the client. And I think the more esoteric actions that we can learn how to do that other people don't know how to do and produce them more efficiently with fewer people, I think the more effective we'll be. So over time, my goal is to contain and maybe even shrink the size of the professionals so that everybody just keeps being upskilled rather than saying we're just going to add more bodies and do more hourly billing. But I think that's the mentality a lot of law firms still are in.
I like your answer, and especially I like the comparison that you made with other markets, because it's funny, but I heard a lot, my office, my law firm is that big with that areas, but is it profitable? Is efficient? And sometimes they even don't know the numbers. If you take the market here in Brazil, maybe one or two law firms say about how profitable they are. The others, if you ask about that, they don't like to say, they don't want to say, they prefer to say how many areas they have, how big they are. So it's really nice to hear you about that. and to make this comparison. We go ahead, but firstly, Michael, take a breath. I will talk about another sponsor that we have, that is Camargo Alfataria. Right now, I'm wearing this coat, and it's really nice because Camargo is a tailor-made suit company, but they have some casual clothes as this coat. So if you want, or your people here, your professionals that I know they are very fancy, if they want to buy something there, in the first purchase, they have 10% discount using the voucher Direito de Resposta 10. So right now, I'll tell to our listeners.
A Camargo é referência em alfaiataria sob medida, com um atendimento super personalizado, daqueles que você percebe que cada detalhe foi pensado para você. Além das peças feitas sob medida, a Camargo também tem looks casuais incríveis, perfeito para o dia a dia, disponíveis no e-commerce da marca. E para você que está ouvindo a gente, tem desconto especial. Usando o código Direito de Resposta 10, você garante 10% de desconto na sua primeira compra.
Coming back, Michael, you have, as I told in the beginning of our conversation, a really nice story, a 30 years story with a bunch of emblematic, important cases. You told some here. Is there one of these emblematic cases that is important for you? If so, can you tell for our listeners?
I think that one of the biggest rewards of the focus of our firm has been because we're focused on mostly international cases involving really special situations like fraud, misconduct, really contentious, is meeting a lot of fascinating people and seeing a lot of situations even stranger than the movies. So I could go on and on. I'll just pick one, and then if we have time to hear more, we can come up with others. So this was a case where we represented a Commonwealth of the United States, a place called the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. So the U.S., in addition to having states, has commonwealths, like Puerto Rico is a commonwealth. This is part of the territory of the U.S., but it's not quite a state. But they have U.S. courthouses, U.S. government there, etc. And the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands had a very large tax judgment against a very rich person named William Millard, who had left the Northern Mariana Islands. They couldn't find them for many years. And they had many lawyers doing all kinds of discovery to try to find out where he was, tried to do proceedings against him. And when we got involved, the way we found them, even though for many years they had done all these legal things to try to find them and they couldn't, they tried to sort of look at judicial proceedings against people he had done business with, all kind of led nowhere. The way we found him was, I figured he's at an age where he would want to visit his grandchildren. So we literally just had people hide in the bushes outside his grandchildren's home during Christmas. And he and his wife came to visit their grandchildren. And then the investigators we hired just followed them to the airport, bought tickets so they could get through security, went to the gate where they were boarding a flight, bought tickets right from the gate agent, and then followed them to their home in the Cayman Islands. And that's what began the whole case, which was a very successful conclusion. So the reason I cite that case is there was so much law involved in terms of what you could do. But I think stepping out of the lawyer mentality of, here are the legal things I know how to do, I want to look for a chance to do my legal things, is to really think about it from the client's perspective of what would be the best way to find someone. And the answer was not in law. It was literally hiding in the bushes outside of their grandchildren's home, right? And a lot of legal cases actually are solved this way. I'm not saying law is not relevant, but legal activity is really just a part of the overall solution. And I think the problem with many law firms is they manufacture legal services, and when a client comes to them with a problem, they try to fit the problem into the legal service they already know how to do. And no, I don't think people really do this consciously. As I mentioned earlier, even though many clients think lawyers are greedy or there's that view, in fact, most lawyers I've met are actually quite intellectually honest professionals who want to do right by the client. But their definition of doing right by the client is doing legal things that they know how to do and trying to do them on the client situation, as opposed to just sometimes stepping out of the law and thinking about what is the best way to achieve it. So that was a really fascinating case. That touched off years and years of litigation that when we ended up seizing a home in Belgium to a bunch of offshore accounts. Really fascinating. But it all started with just hiding in the bushes.
It's really nice, and thanks for the story. And it's emblematic, the story. And why? Because you explain it just not about the legal services. You have to understand the perspective of your client, and you have to think, you have to have a holistic vision, not just the legal services. That's really nice. But what's the end of this story? What happened?
Ultimately, we had a groundbreaking ruling in the Cayman Islands, which is, as you might know, tax judgments cannot actually be recognized internationally. So you cannot get a tax judgment in one country, and it's not like a regular judgment where then you go to a different country and you have a court recognize it like its own judgment. Tax judgments generally are not enforceable internationally. But we brought a bankruptcy proceeding against the Millards based on the tax judgment. This was a new principle of law. Even though you cannot bring the judgment into the country, can you start a bankruptcy proceeding against somebody based on the tax judgment? That plus a bunch of suits we had against his family members for essentially accepting money to what we were alleging was to try to hide it, ended up resulting in a settlement of the entire case. So that was very satisfying.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for sharing again. Michael, we are almost in the end of our episode, so I'll talk about a barbershop, Corleone, our sponsor. And I bring a gift for you.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know until when we'll stay here in Brazil, but you have 6 services. You can have your haircut or you can shave your beard. Here, nearby here in Faria Lima Avenue, a very beautiful barbershop. And right now, I'll tell to our listeners.
A Corleone carrega a tradição de unir estilo e cuidado masculino em ambientes sofisticados, com unidades no Itaim Bibi, Faria Lima e Morumbi Shopping. E para você, ouvinte do Direito de Resposta, temos uma condição especialíssima. Ao agendar um corte de cabelo, a barba no valor de R$100 sai como cortesia. Para usar é simples, utilize o código Direito de Resposta. Essa vantagem é válida exclusivamente na unidade da Faria Lima, nossa maior e mais recente casa, que fica na Avenida Brigadeiro Faria Lima, 2902. E você pode agendar nos telefones aqui embaixo.
Michael, as I told you, we are in the end of our episode, and you have a very beautiful career. Do you regret of anything, and how far do you want to go?
So I have many regrets of things I could have done better. I think one of the interesting personality traits of both me and Steve Kobre, who I think we've kind of imported into the firm, is we try to be very honest with ourselves about things we could have done better. And I think it's at the same pace today. So I have many regrets, everything from, actually, when you do trials, and I still have dreams about trials I've done, where I wish I had asked certain cross-examination questions differently. I don't know how this stuff ends up in your subconscious, but it just comes out from time to time. When I was a prosecutor, I ended up putting some people in jail for a really long time. And I don't feel guilty about it because my job was just to enforce the law. But I do feel like many aspects of the system didn't really have the outcome that the system was, the politicians designed the system to do. So you could just go on and on. But in the aggregate, I really feel like I got a lot more out of life than I ever deserved. So I don't regret the whole aggregate, but there are many components I wish I could have done better. Now, I think in terms of the future, what I'm really focused on is I plan to be at the firm my whole working life. I think the concept of, you used to work and then because you have to work and then at one point you retire because you really wanted to do this other thing. Probably for many people, that is a good framework for how to think about their next years. But for me, I think you spend so much time working and you design a firm that does the work that you enjoy. I actually think for me, this actually is how I would spend my retirement if I could do anything. So I plan to just think about how to make the firm evolve. I think the advent of AI is a really interesting and quite concerning development that will really challenge the legal industry. And then every world event we end up being affected by, everything from the Russia-Ukraine conflict to volatility in the markets. It creates new types of litigation. And so I think fundamentally it's just more of the same I want to do. But I think seeing the legal profession really change over time and evolving our firm is really what my passion is.
Talking about the past, I totally agree with you. It was your job, but I understand what you felt. And talking about the future, that's it. You don't need to have a dream. Just continue and following your solid and brilliant trajectory. Michael, we've talked about the whole episode about your professional life. But what do you like to do in your free time? What do you like to do in your personal life?
So I often tell clients, actually, litigation is my hobby. I don't really feel like, oh, now I've done the work I don't want to do. Now this is what I really want to do. So I actually spend most of my time thinking and doing work. I exercise, I meet friends, etc. But I already get to do through work what I want, which is to travel internationally. I guess if I had a hobby, it's studying different languages and cultures. But I also get to do that through work. So I'm trying to incorporate my hobbies into my work and make my work my hobby.
So have a mix, like personal life and professional life together.
Yeah. And at some point, I think if you work long enough, almost every friend you have, you met through work. So it all kind of becomes the same thing.
That's true. Finally, do you have any advice to our listeners? I know that you brought some really nice stories during this episode. Yes, you give some advice, but to finish this important episode, do you have any advice to our listeners?
Yeah, I think probably my advice should be directed to people younger than me and less experienced than me, because I think people of my equivalent or more experience probably know more about what they want and how they want to conduct their lives than I could advise them on. So I think for people younger than me, especially I think those who are in the associate to junior partner to mid-level partner kind of ranks, I think that the key to, from my personal view, the key to success is to really internally identify what assumptions do you have that are really ideas other people put into your head. The importance of status, or the importance of institutions, the importance of doing things the same way that they've always done. Like, is this something you really believe, or is this something that other people put into your head, and now you're like so wrapped up into this thing, you have adopted this personality that other people have put into you. Deep down, is everything you do, if you did it for the rest of your career, and then one day that was it, is this actually how you want to live your life? Because you only get to do it once. Now, if the answer is yes, deep down, these are all my own thoughts, and I'm not just copying other people, then, you've achieved a level of Zen and you can live happily. I suspect for most people, if they did that deep introspection, a lot of things they think are actually were ideas other people put into them or the profession put into them. So I think to have the courage to try out new things, rather than just thinking, well, what's the next prestigious thing I'm supposed to get? And really think, if we're in the service profession, from the client's perspective, what kind of new lawyer would they find more valuable? And make incremental changes to try to become that new lawyer. I think it's a much more exciting way to go through the rest of your career, rather than thinking, I'll keep doing the same thing, and as my hair gets grayer, I'll be going from mid-level partner to senior partner, and then that'll be the end.
Thank you very much. We finished this episode with a golden key. I'll thank you, but before I'll break the rules, I will talk to my audience to give an advice as well, because this was a challenge for me. It's out of my comfortable zone. Have a whole episode in English, so thanks for share that with me. But what I want to say to you, my audience, is challenge yourself. Do it. Go out of your comfortable zone. I have classes in English once a week, but it's completely different to speak in English in a trip and have a whole episode in English. And I'm very happy with the result. Maybe we'll be the first of a bunch of other international episodes. Thank you very much, Michael. Congrats for your brilliant career. I'm very happy to have you here in my podcast, in Direito de Resposta, in this emblematic and so important first international episode. Thank you so much to share your story with our audience.
Great. Thank you.
Fim de papo. Se você gostou, recomenda para seus amigos. Se não, fala comigo que eu quero te ouvir. Até a próxima!
Este podcast foi editado por Felipe Mux.